Recording in progress.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'll call this council meeting to order, and I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we'll go on to the regular minutes of May 9th, moved by Councillor Dirksen, second by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the minutes of the Town of Minto May 9th, 2023 regular council meeting be approved. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. I'm going to take a moment, and I had two emails after the last meeting, after our last council meeting, and the two folks were really happy with our volume most of the time. I said, that's quite an improvement. So they could hear everybody most of the time. So I'm going to ask that if you want to do something really interesting, listen to our videoed council meeting and see who it is that they can't hear all of the time. Moving right along.
Why don't you just tell us who that is?
I did not listen to the last meeting. Sorry. Moved by Councillor Gunson, second by Councillor Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the Town of Minto Council convenes into the Committee of the Whole. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. So we have no public meetings tonight. It seems to be feast or famine. We either have 4 or 5 or 0. So, but tonight we have a delegation. Councillor David Anderson, County Councillor David Anderson. He's going to enlighten us on the Wellington County Quarterly Update. So welcome, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Turton. And it's great to be here at the Town of Minto's council meeting. Deputy Mayor Anderson and council and staff. It's halfway through, almost halfway through our first year, and we've got a lot of stuff done from the town and from the county. And what I'd like to do is just give you a couple updates on what's happening in the county, more of the committees that I'm on. And I'm going to be light and brief because I'm going to open up for a bit of Q&A maybe after, because I'm sure there's going to be some questions after that. So I sit on, what I do is Wellington County Social Services. I do chair, and I've done that for quite a few years. I sit as a member on Wellington County Solid Waste and also a committee member on Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health Unit. So with social services of the county, it's a great big portfolio. It takes the 3 major aspects of social services is Ontario Works, childcare, and housing. And we were actually appointed by the province back, I've seen 1997 as the Consolidated Municipal Services Manager. So what we're doing is we're responsible for those 3 programs in not only the County of Wellington, but also the City of Guelph. But what I'm going to really talk on social services is a big thing that we've been dealing with lately, and it's going to get worse, and we are doing a lot of pre-planning to deal with this problem, and that's on homelessness and mental health and addiction. With homelessness situation is that most of our homeless people are found in the City of Guelph, but even around in our local municipalities, we've seen the odd people that are homeless here. The issue that we have is all our shelters and all our major support systems are in the City of Guelph for shelters and for support services for homelessness. But we as the county are looking at moving more shelters into the north because there's a need for that here. On June 8th, I attended a conference down in Toronto, and it was on homelessness. And there was about 280 delegates there from all over Ontario dealing with situations of homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health. And their forecast is because of this last COVID-19 shutdown between 20 and 21 that's caused a lot of pressure on people, there are going to be more homeless people we're going to be experiencing in the next 5 years. So what we have to do is we have to set programs in place that we can deal with that problem in advance. We're only seeing a few people here and there, but it is going to get worse, so we're trying to set up programs to help those people. And what I would like to do maybe, because of social services are so broad, I would like to maybe give an invitation back, and I would just deal with the presentation on just social services, and I'll have some great numbers for that at a later time. Next I would like to talk on is our Wellington County solid waste. And some interesting specs. Basically, in the County of Wellington, we have one landfill site over at Riverston and Kenilworth, but we have 5 transfer stations, and we're responsible for those all sites. And what I've done is I've been able to give you some specs on just the Minto site. And it's kind of neat. It shows you the tonnage of that's being buried, but the amount of material that's being diverted. And really over half of the volume of tonnage that goes into this to the transfer station, we are diverting them. There's always a cost of diversion, but what it does is it adds life to our basically our landfill site. And for instance, the leaf and yard diversion, for instance, and also we started a new program, which the numbers aren't here, but it's household kitchen waste that we pick up now weekly, and it gets down to the Walker recycling program in Arthur. There's a huge cost of picking that up, but between the yard waste and household waste, what it does is it extends a year of life to our Riverston landfill site, and that's equivalent to about $1.2 million per year. So the cost of picking it up is $400,000 and $500,000 to pick up. Well, you're actually saving $1.2 million and extending the life of the landfill site. So that's the way we look at it. Interesting numbers, total number of customers at just the Minto site per year, 29,272 visits. So those are just all interesting numbers that our transfer station is very busy out there. I've also given you just a chart, and everybody knows this collection chart, the curbside collection chart, that in Minto, we are number B, week B. I know everybody has those numbers, but I always see around town in Minto, there's yellow garbage bags out almost every week. So it's just, for people that are listening to this program tonight, check your scheduling. It's Schedule B. It's plain as day. And so your garbage won't be sitting out for a week's time for the gentleman to pick it up. The County of Wellington also has gotten into a recycling program also. And we were able to receive awards for the last 2 years, and it's called Call to Recycle Leader in Sustainable Awards. What this basically, this group, it's a bunch of producers of batteries that are responsible for recovering and recycling batteries when consumers need to dispose of them. And there were 3 producers that started this organization called PRO, and part of this organization was called this Call to Recycle program. So what the county does is they have availability for people, our residents in Wellington County, to drop old batteries into all our libraries, which is our 14, and to the administration center in the County of Wellington. And what has happened is that we've been able to divert 10,081 kilograms of batteries in 1 year. And that's taken batteries out of the landfill site. So again, that's another great program, and we've been rewarded by getting, for the 2nd year, being recognized as a leader in sustainable recycling. So they're doing a great job from that perspective. The other committee that I'm on is, and this is a new committee to me, is the Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health Committee. It's an exciting committee, and what it does is their main directive and their drive is protecting the health of individuals and families and communities, and by promoting healthier behaviors, and public health helps you stay well. And there's a whole list of responsibilities that we, as the public health in Guelph, Wellington, and Dufferin, are responsible for, and I have them listed there. Our committee members we have 3 board members. There are 3 members from Wellington County. There are 3 from the city of Guelph, 2 from Dufferin, and then there's 3 appointees from the province. So we have an appointee from Wellington County and Dufferin, but there's still a vacant seat from Guelph. And our past mayor, George Bridge, chairs that committee, and he's doing a good job. What we do is we get weekly updates from what's happening in the County of Wellington and Dufferin and Guelph, and it's kind of neat what's happening and through the different aspects, and these are media coverage reports, and it's good to be there. It's a very active community, and you know what? They've gone through a lot through COVID, 20 and 21, like everybody else has. But you know what? I think we in the our unit was the first unit that were able to set up vaccination centers. We were the first area that had centers set up before any other parts of Ontario did. And that just shows the efficiency of our health unit doing a good job. I had one document that got out of my organization, and this is again through housing. Because sometimes we will be walking down the street and you'll see somebody that's maybe homeless or see somebody that's having a hard issue or a time. You know, they could be crying, they could be giggling, they could be doing funky dances and things like that. But what there's a call number, and you have it in your portfolio. It's how can we help housing services? So there's a whole list of issues and phone numbers there you can call. And what will happen is if somebody is experiencing homelessness and you call these numbers, we will have a mental health worker come up and see that individual and see what support they can give them. Or if somebody's having a meltdown or a breakdown, you know, we're not trained individuals to deal with people like that, but there's support services with that. It's not a foolproof system. I know that here 24/7 line, I had to use that once. I left a message and they said, we'll be back to you in 24 hours or 48 hours. And like they were back to me in 24 hours, right on the nose. And by that time, the issue was dealt with, and I dealt with it myself. But you know, they're experiencing funding issues from the province too, you know, and staffing problems. But it's there, and they know they need how to expand that. So, we had that at that meeting at the county meeting, which was just a week ago Monday. We invited all the municipalities to come down and talk about homelessness and affordable housing and building. And this was presented at that meeting. So it's coming out to all the municipal offices because anybody has a problem, they always call the municipal office. So now you have connection and contacts to call them for that. For the homelessness and housing, the county's looking at doing another invitation in the fall. And we hope to have as many members from municipalities to attend that and dealing with homelessness and mental health addiction. And Mr. Mayor, that is my presentation. And again, if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer some.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. It's really good that you're here, and it's good to listen to you about all the good things that are happening down the county. And it's been very interesting for me to go and be a part of that. I'm on the Roads Committee and Solid Waste System, so if there's questions for Dave, and I'm sure there is, I know that he's got all the answers. So.
If not, I'll find them.
If not, he'll find them. Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Dave, I look around Palmerston, Harrison, and maybe you see a person that you think is homeless. We don't have encampments that I know of, you know, that you can create that, say we've got people that are homeless and are staying somewhere. I'm not sure we're looking for, but I just lately, just a matter of a week or so, I've heard that homelessness has got huge in Listowel, and they have encampments there. So how long before it moves this way?
Yep.
And I hear they've been encouraged by other communities to come to Listowel. That's the rumor and that story I've heard. So I don't know whether that's going to happen. Is there any plan at all if we get into that situation, how we can help these people or deal with it, I guess?
Right. So Councillor Elliott, you're exactly right. Remember how I said that we expect in the next 5 years to have an increase of homelessness. Mm-hmm. We haven't had any encampment issues that I believe that in the town of Minto yet. Center Wellington had, I think, 3 tents of encampments. But what we have to do is we have to prepare for that. We know that's going to come. Mm. And by preparing ahead of time, we're seeing what's happening in the city of Guelph. We saw what happened in the city of Waterloo on their situation. And we're learning from that. We're learning from the experiences made from other people and to be prepared for that.
I know we've been dealing with that at OSAM, and I would say a majority of the communities that are involved in OSAM executive have homeless problems. So we're trying to deal with that. So if I can help you with that too, if it comes forward, I'll help you too.
Perfect. Thank you.
And it's not just cities.
No.
For sure. Other questions? So I toured the Riverston landfill today, and Doss was the guest speaker. I guess there was 25 kelp kids in a bus, and we toured around the bus, in the bus around the site. And one of the things that I remember was that there's 18 solid waste dumps in Wellington County, but there's only one open. So I found that extremely interesting. We talked about the one in Palmerston for some time, and I mean, they reassured us that all of the facilities in the county are very secure. There's no issues. When did Wellington County take over that total landfill situation? Do you know, Dave?
I believe it was in 1999. Gord's backed me up on that. He didn't squeak that to me. He endorsed me. So one of the things that the county has done is, over the years, they have a reserve fund for the landfill sites, because there are cap landfill sites in Minto. So eventually they're going to have to be closed down. And the reason why the county took over the operation of the landfill sites is municipalities couldn't afford those costs. So now we, in our reserve, our landfill site reserve, we have money there that when a landfill site needs to be closed, we have money to close them down. They don't have times. They don't have a time. I've asked that question. The Minto landfill site, they don't have a specific time that it has to be closed down. They're monitoring. They got monitoring wells out there, monitoring the leachate. It still meets Ministry of Environment standards. It's still in good shape, so there's no pressure in doing that. So.
The other thing that I found interesting, over the last 6 months, one of the sites over at Riverstown was closed down completely. They put the clay cap on it, which is 2 feet high, and then dirt, and then dirt. So they're trying something new, because historically they can only go so high with the landfill, and so what they found is, over the years, with the snow load and everything else, anyways, to make a long story short, they're going to be able to take that clay and dirt off and put another year's garbage in there, and it's amazing what a year will do. From what I understand, in Ontario today, there's enough landfill for 8 years. After 8 years, other than the one in Wellington and a few others, will be full. So they give the numbers. There's quite a number of loads of garbage going across the border every day to be burnt or to put in landfill down in Ohio, Michigan, somewhere down there. And if the borders were ever stopped, the borders were ever closed, that 8-year number would move to 2. So, other questions for Dave? Well, again, Dave, thank you for coming, and I believe we have you set up. Help me with that, Mark. We have him set up every 3 months, so you're going to be back.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you. Public question period. Dave, is there anything you need to know? Next item, moved by Councillor Zimmerman, second by Councillor Elliott, that the council receives the correspondence as information. There is 5 items on as correspondence. So unless someone wants to pull one of those out, I'm going to call, go ahead, Councillor Dirksen.
Thank you, Mayor Turton. I'm wondering, do we have a community flagpole?
We do.
Well, I see one out there that's about 5 feet high. I'm hoping it's going to be a little higher than that.
It is.
Is
It's
it
just
gonna
taken
be
apart right now,
repaired?
but yes, they will have it
Oh,
back
okay.
together. Yes.
Okay, because I knew last year it kind of blew away in the wind.
As far as I understand, the flagpole is to be put back together, so.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Other questions? All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Reports. So we get committee minutes for approval, staff reports. Number 1 then is CAO 2023-003. It's provincial legislative and policy changes, the Wellington County Municipal Comprehensive Review. And we are tonight privileged to have our friend, Mr. Bill White from, I believe he's in Texas, but he's in Hairston as well. In Minto, I should say, pardon me.
Yes,
And
sir.
good evening, Mr. White. How are you?
I'm very well, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the chance to speak to you.
I understand it's extremely warm where you are.
It is a beautiful day today.
So, how do we proceed? Do you want to go over your report, if you don't mind, please, Bill?
I can, thank you. I wasn't sure if the CAO was going to speak first, but
All
I
right.
will go ahead.
You'll be okay with that, Mark? Chris?
Yes,
Okay. Both of them have their thumbs up, Bill, so you're on.
thank you. Mayor Turton, Deputy Mayor Anderson, council and staff, it's a pleasure to speak to you. I don't think I've spoken to council since last fall. I'm here to talk about the new planning system in Ontario. I feel bad for your staff because they've heard a lot of my stories before, so I'll try not to repeat them. But the planning system in Ontario, about 25 years ago, it's like we put a fresh coat of paint on a house. But since then, it's been painted and patched, and the colors don't match anymore. And this last year or so, council or the province has basically scraped all that paint off, and they're starting anew. And you know, when you do that to a house, there's always some underlying flaws that you find. And I think you'll find as we go through this, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a house that needed to be scraped back and painted again. I'll refer you to the summary section of the report. The report talks about Bill 109 and Bill 23 and Bill 96 and the proposed provincial planning statement. And in there, there's 7 bullet points I'm hoping that council would consider putting in a letter from the mayor and commenting to the province on as far as this new coat of paint that's being put on the provincial planning statement. You would have until June 5th to do that. And it's all based on concerns that you picked up about a year ago. I remember reporting to you on the Ontario Housing Task Force report. I believe it was then Councillor Anderson asked that agenda item be pulled, and town staff with my assistants brought back a report with a bunch of really strange ideas that might help create new housing. And it seems like the province has taken on a lot of those sort of crazy ideas, and they feel the problem's bad enough that they need to go ahead with some of them. So you had asked that staff report back on that, and there was so many changes this last year that we really haven't been able to do that. So here we sit to talk about the new provincial planning statement and the many changes that have been made to try and make affordable and attainable housing more available. Everybody hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, Bill, go
Okay.
ahead. We're in good shape here.
All right. So back last year, the goal, and you've heard it in the media likely, was 1.5 million homes in the last 10 years. In one of the links on the report, you'll find that housing starts last year were about 89,000. So already we're behind that aspirational goal. I'm hoping that, and I believe that this council has been an advocate for the kinds of streamlining and efficiencies that are attempting to come forward here. I will want to talk a little bit about the concerns that I think you may share regarding rural and prime agricultural land development. And I think the report and the comments will touch on that. I had done, with your staff support, 6 update reports on a process called a municipal comprehensive review. And that was a county process where they were reviewing their official plan. And it has an important long title, Municipal Comprehensive Review, because there's a big manual that the province wrote that all the Ontario municipalities had to follow. We're 2 years into this review, and the previous council had received those 6 reports. Well, the new provincial planning statement will change that whole process, and we'll get to that. So this is, it's called the 7th update report, but really what we're reporting on is a whole new planning system. Unfortunately, a lot of this change has occurred or is in the process of occurring, and it occurred, a lot of it during municipal elections or during your inaugurations or through the holidays. So it was a real challenge for staff to kind of know when the right time was to come to you and to give you some information and to get feedback. But they've picked the right time. Now is when the provincial planning statement is up for comment till June 5th. And that's the purpose of this delegation. And we're hoping that you will support some form of comment that the province continue with initiatives that support creating new attainable and affordable housing, and continue to protect prime agricultural land and resources and the environment. And that's always been the challenge. And I think that with the cooperation of the county and the town staff, I think Minto will be well served to use this new regulation and new policy to its benefit. The first point, and I was kind enough to, or lucky enough to be invited to a meeting of almost all the municipal planners in Wellington County a few weeks ago. Minto staff were there too, and they graciously allowed me to sit in on it. And so everybody's talking about this. People are talking about this all over the province. I'm sure you know that your MPP, Matt Ray, is a parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and he's well versed on this, and he is a resource for you, I'm sure, in terms of explaining where the province wants to go on this. I mentioned that complicated municipal comprehensive review process. That was the process where, to make it short and sweet, that's when you were able to adjust urban boundaries. That was the only time. And as of the new provincial planning statement, that whole comprehensive review process that was only going to happen every 10 years is now going to be over if it's approved in this fashion. So I think that's a really good thing. I think the county staff report, you have that, I think, as an attachment. It's linked into my report. And I think in that cross county meeting of all the municipal planners, pretty much everyone was happy that the municipal comprehensive review process would no longer need to be followed. That would mean that urban boundaries in Clifford, Harrison, and Palmerston don't have to wait every 10 years and a new population projection and a regimented manual-driven process happening. You can be much more responsive to the market. So that's a main initiative that I think will help open the market up to providing more housing. It was interesting to reflect on Initiative 9.1 in the Minto strategic plan. Many of you on council and the staff members were here when that plan was written. And it calls for the kind of streamlined procedures that allow good development to go ahead quickly that the province is now pursuing. So you as a municipality have been kind of talking about this and aspiring to this for over 10 years. And Minto staff has done a great job on this and continues to do a great job on this, and so has the county staff, but they've all been hampered by some very restrictive things that were in one of those many coats of paint put on this process over the last 25 years. in the update reports that we have been giving to council on the now ended municipal comprehensive review process, we had been talking about the need to be flexible. If, for example, growth doesn't go at a high rate in, say, Center Wellington, but Minto wants to see more housing growth, then Minto should be flexible to try and attain that market. And Center Wellington should have the ability, if it wishes, to restrict housing if for whatever reason they don't feel they can accommodate it. The comprehensive review process did not allow that. Under the new policy, you would be allowed to move growth between lower tier municipalities and also between your settlement areas like Clifford, Harriston, and Palmerston. Some of you were on council when in 2018, 2019, and into 2020, we expanded the Palmerston urban boundary. But the comprehensive review process and those inflexible policies made you shrink the urban boundary of Harriston and Clifford. And we were heading down that road again under this process that there was going to be a boundary expansion in Palmerston, but the other ones were still up in the air. So the province has intervened now, and it looks like that whole restriction, which I think was a frustration for staff at both levels, would be removed. And I'm hoping that you would consider commenting in favor of that process coming out. There's been a lot, and I do follow the Ontario Canadian media quite a bit, and there has been some pretty important articles on the rural and agricultural policies, which are very, very much more open. And I think this is something that has to be measured. And I think the County of Wellington is certainly well positioned with its current policies to allow for some residential development in prime ag lands with some conditions, but only where it can meet the minimum distance separations and some other information and requirements that are already in place. So it's not a great, huge change for Wellington. It will be a big change for others. The impact of allowing lots to be created in prime ag lands, that is a different story. And I'm not 100% sure how that will work. And so I think it would be important for council to, if they see it fit, to emphasize the need to protect prime ag lands. The province intends to protect them. The best lands are to be protected. The specialty crop areas will be protected. It's the lower land capable soils that may be subject to more flexible policies. I think they realize that you're not going to get all your needed housing in rural areas, but I think it's recognizing that there has to be a contribution. And one final point on that one is that the county came up with this idea of rural clusters, which are little sections of housing that are in communities. And I think in rural areas, if you're building upon these little rural clusters and making them bigger with new lot creation, as long as you're meeting MDS separations and you're protecting the environment and you're not ruining rural infrastructure, you're not putting roads that you have to plow, extend to be plowed and that kind of thing. As long as that happens, I think that's a place to start with it. And I think the idea of rural clusters is a good one. I just wouldn't want to see new subdivisions popping up in every piece of secondary ag land across Minto or across rural Ontario for that matter, because I think there has to be some attempt to mold it into the community. Finally, the report talks about a couple of other things that really aren't huge issues for council or for the staff. The Planning Act itself, I mean, I've had top lawyers tell me that even they can't read it anymore. And I wasn't sure whether it was age or me or how complicated it is, but they need to strip that act back to something much more manageable. I think staff have had to spend a lot of time looking at the new steps that have been added to the process and refunds and all this kind of stuff and new processes. And I think that's counterproductive. I think staff would like to be working on getting new developments going forward and not trying to get up to date with the Planning Act every 2 or 3 months. So that process happened with the Municipal Act about 20 years ago. They basically stripped it back. And I think that needs to happen once these new policies get in place and people get used to them. The Planning Act should be next. It needs to be much more simple and easy to follow and less exception on top of exception, on top of regulation, on top of new initiative. I talk a little bit about new units coming on and the possibility that they may go to short-term rentals. I spoke to your Director of Development, Mr. Kuipers, about this, and it's not really a problem there. But one of the worries I see is if people start putting a second or third unit on their rural property or on their home property or in their basement or however they do it under these new rules, that is available to people who need it for long-term rental, for affordable or attainable housing. Certainly down here, there is a lot of housing that sits empty and gets rented during high, tourist seasons. I'm sure it's a problem in places like Collingwood along in the Wasaga Beach, Niagara Falls. These new units that come on, they need to be incentivized to be available for, in particular, rental housing, I believe. Rental housing has been undersupplied in Ontario for 40 years. And I think that these as of right units in homes and on properties is a good thing and a really good opportunity for long-term rental housing. And if that were all to start going to short-term rentals, I think it would entirely defeat the purpose. You also can, I heard County Councillor Anderson speak about homelessness and housing being available to all sectors of our economy, those that make the least, is critically important. And I first became alarmed when, you see the homelessness throughout North America, but aside from that too, you also see people who traditionally would like to own a home or rent a home or occupy a good housing, can't access it. And so I think it's critical that we get on board to get the supply up for all segments of the economy. And if you can provide for people in the low to middle ends of the economy, then I think some of the homelessness will be helped as well. And finally, one that's always been a big problem, and the new planning statement talks about infrastructure planning and the need for it. And you've heard reports from time to time about development charges being limited and restricted and cut back and so forth. And I think the province and the federal government finally need to make a commitment to sustainable, unconditional capital infrastructure funding for municipalities to direct towards making sure that lands can be developed and that the private market can move forward with projects to meet these unprecedented housing shortages that we're facing. And this isn't a new thing. You've been doing tangible capital asset management planning to the provincial government for a long time, and some grant programs have come and gone. But if we're to get on board as a group on providing more housing, then the province, and if the province truly believes that development charges are a hindrance on that affordability and attainability, then they need to pony up with the federal government on some help to fund the kinds of projects that are needed. And that doesn't mean we don't want developers should pay for the infrastructure they need, but there are costs that we know that municipalities incur as infrastructure grows and to service lands. And we need to make sure we have strong partners on this, providing money that's sustainable with no strings attached. So there isn't long reports needed to justify this grant and that grant, that it's reviewable and that as long as the capital planning is occurring, there's a sustained source of funding to help this council meet the needs that are going to come forward, we hope. And my last point speaks to the County of Wellington and the planning approval system that they have there and the work that they do. I feel it's important to support that. I've been able to work quite closely with them the last couple of years on the comprehensive review and on some work with some private clients. And I sense their frustration with a lot of the regulation. Their report that you have speaks to it. And they really do, I think, a pretty good job balancing things and providing advice and working on day-to-day issues with your staff. And I'm hopeful that you would consider supporting that department in the work they do, both in day-to-day and long-range planning, because some of the initiatives that the province is taking approval authorities away from upper tiers. And you've seen some reports and probably heard about this in some of the conferences you may attend. So I think it's important that where a relationship between an upper and lower tier and an approval process is working, that it be allowed to work. And I think you do have a good one in Wellington County. And I think with these kinds of changes, if they're managed right, I think everyone will be able to do a lot more to make things happen more quickly. So that's the extent of my presentation. There's a lot of information there. I guess I would just refer you to the 7 bullet points in the summary. Those are what we're hoping, or I was recommending that you include in a comment to the province on this new policy regime that's now coming forward. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
So thank you, Bill. So basically, those 7 bullet points, you've pretty well touched on most of them. In fact,
yes,
maybe all of them. So questions for our Mr. Speaker here, Mr. White? Go ahead, Councillor White.
Again, development charges, we're losing those, correct? Is that correct, Bill?
So for what they're defining as attainable or affordable housing, they're restricting the increases. They're requiring you to spend certain amounts of them, but you're not losing them in their entirety. And that's part of the challenge here, is because not only has the Planning Act been changed, but 6 or 7 other pieces of legislation, including the Development Charges Act. So your bylaw, and I'm not sure where you are on that, but Minto's bylaw will have to be amended. And as far as it pertains to affordable and attainable housing, there will be some restrictions on what can be collected. But they have to first, as far as I understand it, announce what affordable and attainable housing is. And I don't believe they've done that yet. So the short answer is yes, development charges are going to be restricted if they're not already. And I'm hoping that with the sustained infrastructure funding that the provinces and the federal government realize they're doing that, and that they make that available as a replacement source of funds.
Thanks.
Other questions? Councillor Dirksen.
Thank you, Mayor Turton. Unless I'm looking at the wrong place here, I have 6 points at the end of my.
It's on page 1 and 2.
Yep.
Page what? Sorry.
Bottom
Page
of
1
page
and
1,
2. Bottom
top
of
of
page
page
1
2.
and top of page 2. For the summary. I think you're down further. Document.
Up near the top.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I may not have counted them right too.
No, there's
but
7.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Bill, would you say that affordable, attainable housing is different in every community? So I'm, for example, if I live in Whistledge and I have a job that's paying me $150,000, I might be able. My wife's making 100. I might be able. Attainable might be 600 to 700,000. If I'm living in Minto and I'm making 60, and my wife's making 40, a $700,000 house is not attainable. So,
Yes.
I mean, I can see why the government is having trouble defining that.
Yeah. So I think it will need to be community based. You're absolutely right. There's a big difference even still with what's attainable and what's affordable in Puslinch or the south of Wellington versus the north. I mean that was particularly alarming last year when you're talking $1 million homes in in Harrison being bought at $1 million and Palmerston or wherever they were. I mean, when I left there 5 years ago, average housing prices were around 300 or 400,000, maybe even less than that. So it's just the market has been so limited and the demand so high that the prices have outstripped the ability of people with good jobs, really good jobs, to even think about buying one. So that's why I think this initiative to try and get more choice on the market now, well, maybe things are down a little bit, and to be ready for it, when things start to turn around. And there's some CMHC reports on there that give you, if you looked through the links, that will give you some idea what they're saying. But it may not, this slowdown really may not be enough to bring it down to where it's more affordable for even people with moderate incomes. Like my sons have saved down payments and they have good jobs, but and their spouses make pretty good money too, but they're in KW area, Toronto area, and they're not even thinking about buying housing right now. So that's a challenge, and there's a lot more people who will make a lot less than that can't get rental housing. And I think this is a really important initiative to get on board with. And I don't think it's the total answer, but I think it's a start. A fresh coat of paint.
Sorry, when you talk about a down payment, same thing. You know, five years ago, a down payment was a down payment. Today, that down payment that I had ready to put on a house 5 years ago is a partial down payment today.
Yeah.
Councillor Elliott.
Bill, could you see us moving, right, and we've done this in our community, is all-inclusive rentals for people that are ready to retire. They don't want to shovel snow and they don't want to cut grass, but they want to live in a nice little area, retire in a smaller type area. Can you see that? Instead of building, we're gonna, if we could maybe look at building more rentals, and the people that move out of their houses that aren't to the all-inclusive rentals, would that be a way of making more attainable housing? I'm not sure.
Well, I would agree. I think Terry or Ashley or could give you the kind of stats. I mean, Wellington and Minto have kind of led the way on that kind of housing. A lot of places are way behind on that. Not necessarily in Wellington. I think they've done a good job, but I think and that's part of what this new planning policy does, is it kind of makes everyone across Southern Ontario allow for that kind of housing. They've made it mandatory, basically 3 units on urban service lands, like where there's water and sewer, and now they're making it an option or available in rural lands too. So Wellington already had that, and they can see, your staff knows how many units they've done. They've done a really good job here, but that seems to me to be the only source of rental housing now. There could be anybody building it, but I mean, I stand to be corrected on that. But
Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you. So I don't see anything in this. We talk about affordable, we talk about attainable, we talk about this, we talk about that, we talk about we're going to change the planning, but there's nothing that's compelling the developers to build us an affordable home. And the definition of an affordable home for our area, our biggest employer is Minto. 2 people working full-time there can afford a $300,000 mortgage. There is no such property in Minto. The average mean cost as of last month's report was $699,000 plus change. And in Wellington County, it was 830. And I just had a meeting with John Nader and Matthew Ray this morning to discuss this very issue. So we have developers that are coming up here. We're told by the province, if we don't agree, if we don't let them build, the province can step in and say, yes, they can build. And they can take agricultural land to do that. But there's nothing saying any of those units are going to be affordable. And I suspect what they'll be building is large luxury homes for the people in Toronto who can sell their $200 or $2 million building, come up here for $1 million and still have $1 million to the good until they realize there's no Sobeys or grocery store in Clifford, and then we're not sure what they're going to do. But there's nothing compelling affordable housing at all. They've removed the definition because it's impossible to come up with one because it changes for every community.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I'm glad you are speaking to those two gentlemen, because I mean, they can explain it better than I can, and I'm certainly not wanting to sort of say that they'll necessarily accomplish everything they want to, but I think part of what the planning statement says now, it strongly encourages intensification. So reusing lands that are already serviced, that are underused right now for housing. And the hope is that, if you reduce development charges and you make the carrying costs lower and you increase the supply housing, that the market could build a more affordable home if they didn't have so much front end cost on them. So that's the theory about it. They also talk about attainable housing and homelessness plans being important as well. So I'm not saying that this is going to be the only solution, but it is an important solution that we need to make it easier to do housing types of all sorts. So whether they'll get it, like, I'm hoping that when the supply starts to increase, then the cost and the front end costs are decreased. If they start putting in 150,000 houses in Ontario every year, that prices will moderate. We've seen a little bit of that, but yeah, I don't know, Deputy Mayor Anderson, that this is going to be the necessary solution, but something had to be done, at least from the planning side, to make these things happen quicker so that we can address supply issues and decrease the upfront cost to developers.
But so far, what we've seen hasn't decreased costs at all. So if you have a senior citizen who's living in Minto and say they bought their home 50 years ago or 40 years ago and they bought it for $30,000 and they bought the typical yellow brick 2-story, and they can no longer do the stairs, and they could maybe sell it for $350 because probably people would either gut it or tear it down. And in order to buy a single-story townhouse, semi-detached, half the size or a third of the size, it's $650,000. So
Yeah.
70 years of age, they're going to take out a mortgage to cover the $300,000 difference in what their life savings and life work has created versus what it's going to cost to have a somewhat safe house to live in. Like, I would suggest we're not making any progress here at all. And the reason they're allowing us to build extra units is because everybody in this room is going to have to build units on your own property for your children to live in, because they're not going to be able to afford to live anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't seem to be an ideal solution to me for the housing crisis that we're currently facing. It's getting pretty grim. But we have grandchildren who know they'll never own a house, and we have children that will probably end up coming back and living with us because they can't afford to continue. If their mortgages go up, if they get caught on an interest rate hike, they're going to be forced out of their home. And there's no question of youngsters who are working at our blue-collar jobs, which we desperately need, they can't afford a home, and they can't afford to rent. And there is nothing for them to rent, even if they could afford it. So I don't know, I don't see any hope in this plan that the government has come up with that's going to make things better for people. It's going to allow wealthy people to move out of the GTA area up into our area because it's less expensive for them. But it's not providing anything for our local communities, and our power to affect change there has been removed from us because we're no longer allowed to comment.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with what you're saying, Deputy Mayor Anderson. I guess one of the things in my mind I felt like might help is that those people are coming out of the GTA and KW anyway. And where they're going now, because of supply, was they're going into Palmerston, Harrison, and Clifford and paying top dollar for those places because there were no, say, estate homes available for them. So I think if this allows some of that market to be taken care of, maybe the urban areas could be see retain some more affordable, attainable housing. And I'm not here to tell you that this is the only solution. And I share your concerns. I really do. But I do feel that it's important that we scrape this planning system back down to its bare bones and get it into a position where it can be more responsive.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, you guys? So can I just, one thing that you said, Bill, was the extension of the rural clusters. Are you saying, so we have a couple in Minto, maybe 3, could be 4. Well, when I look at a rural cluster, I look at Drew. There's 2 in Drew. There's 1 in Lower Drew and 1 in Upper Drew. There's no services other than hydro and people have their own wells, their own septic. Is that what you're saying?
So,
I guess, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, what the new policy would allow is if it's a secondary agricultural parcel of land, the new policy allows multi-lot residential development. So it implies that the old estate subdivisions could occur wherever you potentially occur, some conditions on it, wherever you have secondary ag land. And what I'm saying is I think that having that rural estate subdivision focus on a place like Drew, or I think you've got a couple of rural subdivision, I can't remember their names anymore, where there's already some estate development, that maybe a road extension in there to add on to that. So around places where there's already 3 or 4 uh, houses on private services would be what I would want to see, rather than, you know, excuse me, new estate subdivisions popping up on every rural or secondary agricultural farm. That so the county has sort of set that rule up in their planning documents, and I'm suggesting that maybe you would want to encourage that kind of rural housing to be on secondary ag lands around existing rural clusters rather than sort of out in the middle of nowhere, say, because then it starts to get a challenge to provide other services like waste management and fire protection and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Great. Other questions for staff? Gord, what do you think? Is there anything sorry, Treasurer Duff.
Hi, Bill. Good to see you. Yeah,
Good to see
well,
you.
you've nailed it. As you know, this is all fine to encourage this development, but we do need the infrastructure. And I was on a webinar this afternoon, and it sounds like one of the few, I guess, somewhat sustainable grants we do have is that old OCIF. So it's still around. It's in a new form, kind of, and they're really emphasizing getting very accurate, they call it CRV, current replacement values for assets. And that's going to be one of the main determinants of going forward. Again, you know very well, you sure can't go by population alone, its size. And Minto is just becoming more and more the small but complicated municipality with a lot of infrastructure and not that many taxpayers and ratepayers to pay for it all. And our public works staff is busy scouting around for, wells and plans to extend sewer capacity. And those things take time. So it's great to have all these projections and have the new affordability. but really you have to be cognizant of what servicing do we have and concentrate again where we do have capacity and we do have infill. But Deputy Mayor has raised many points that are out of our control, but they're no less valid. They hit the
Mhm.
thing. So, yeah, we're hanging our hat on the promises to make municipalities whole. We have to see that.
Mhm.
Thank
If
you.
I may, Mayor Turton, just to Gordon, it is great to see you again. And um, the other issue, and I know development charges had gone up, but I mean, years ago we could never get enough development charges even to help fund it. The amount we retained in Minto wasn't that much. So I mean, this was a problem even when there weren't these restrictions being contemplated on development charges increases and so forth. So I'm not sure that's changed in the last 5 years, but yeah.
It's become more acute because not only do we have more projects to fund in that, the ones that we already have in our plan, the estimates that we prepared 5 years ago, 3 years ago, are totally out of line because municipal inflation is much higher than the CPI. And it's astonishing how great that has become. And so the cost of infrastructure, even for projects that you know about, is certainly outpacing. And I know ours have gone up, but I compare to our neighbors and they're still very low. Meanwhile, the costs have gone up and we have to do more. So yeah, it's the old catch-22 for sure.
Okay, thank you. So Bill, can we use that scenario of the paint? I mean, I think that tells that, the scenario that you use with 60 coats of paint and 60 official plans and all these other things that you talked about, that really helps us understand. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell another repetitive story, so I made that one up for you. So I'm glad it helped.
Listen, we appreciate you being on our team. I mean, you point out a lot of things to us that we, as council, certainly wouldn't think of, and our staff are working with you, and it's great to have you on our team. I'll say that again. So, if there's no other questions,
Just one.
sorry.
When are you coming back to Minto to buy your affordable house?
We'll be close in August, but I'm not sure we're going to make it all the way up. So, but we'll be very close there in the month of August. So I'll let all of you know.
Great.
Maybe some of you can come visit.
Pleasure, Bill. Thanks again.
It's my pleasure, and I just want to say your staff is doing a great job, and they only call me whenever just whenever they have a question, or whenever they're doing a great job on their own. So I know one of the reports I saw that Ashley had done on one of the bills was excellent. So they're doing a great job, and I'm always here to help whenever you need.
Great.
And thank you.
No, thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.
Go Dallas. So we have a recommendation moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Zimmerman, that the Council of the Town of Minto receives a report CAO 2023-003. It's a council update, provincial legislative and policy changes. The Wellington County Municipal Comprehensive Review, that the town staff continues to monitor provincial and countywide policy initiatives regarding land use planning and the official plan review, and that the comments outlined in the report summary be sent to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing before the June 5th deadline. Any other discussion on this? All in favor? The motion? That's carried. Thank you. The next item is the Martin Severance, 9810 Baseline Road, and I'll ask Ashley to enlighten us on this.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Turton. So the staff reports regarding a severance application for the Martin Farm on the corner of Given and Baseline Road. The proposal is to sever approximately 3 acres for a proposed church and cemetery and to retain approximately 100 acres for the existing agricultural use. So the severed property currently has a building permit issued for the church and cemetery, and they're expecting to begin construction after they complete their spring planting. The retained property currently has an existing single-family dwelling and barns. So council may recall this property previously coming before them regarding rezoning the proposed severed portion of the property to permit for the church and cemetery. The site-specific zoning was passed unanimously, and the severance is to divide that portion off of the rest of the farm. The owner has already applied for an entrance permit for new entrances off of Given Road, and town staff are recommending that council recommends the Land Division Committee at the county approve the consent with the standard conditions outlined in the report. This one's really more administrative, being that being that the church and cemetery would be permitted regardless of the severance.
Thank you, Ashley. Recommendation by Councillor Zimmerman, second by Councillor Gunson. The Council of Town of Minto recommends the County of Wellington Land Division Committee approve the consent application B3623 Martin for land legally described as CON 17, Part Lot 12, Part Lot 13 with the municipal address 9810 Baseline Road in the Town of Minto, and that the following conditions be considered. And there's 4 conditions. And I know that we've all read them, so I'm not going to read them again. But I'm going to open it up to questions for Ashley. Any questions in reference to this Martin severance? Do we want to talk about driveways? I found that very interesting when I was talking to you today. Why 2 driveways? Why one wide one and one narrow one?
Yeah, so they actually explained it to us in the meeting with the neighbors we had for the rezoning. The wider one will be used for families. So typically after church, the husbands will go out to the horse and buggy, bring it up to the front of the church, and then everyone gets loaded up, whereas the single people will go out their own separate, smaller driveway just so they don't have to wait in line, essentially. So that's the rationale for the 2 driveways.
Thank you. And construction will be starting in June?
Yeah, as soon as their planting's done.
Okay.
They've paid for the permit, it's issued, they're ready to go.
So if you folks are okay with me not reading those 4 conditions, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of this motion? That's carried. Thank you. Second item is Plan 2023-026, B3823, the Bernard and Goldschmidt severance at 9568 O'Dwyer Road. Ashley, please go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. So the staff report, as noted, is for a severance on O'Dwyer's Road, which is secondary agricultural. So under the provisions of the county official plan, you're able to sever off 1 lot if you meet the requirements, one of which being that you've owned the property for at least 5 years. So this proposal is to sever approximately 1 acre for a proposed rural residential dwelling and to retain approximately 10 acres with the existing and proposed rural residential use. So they did explore other options on the property, but the decision for the current proposed location was decided as the lower part of the property is actually all zoned natural environment and protected conservation lands. So it made more sense to go up adjacent to the Reiner severed lot there as well. There is an existing home industry shed on the retained parcel, and it is considered legal non-conforming. However, a condition of this severance will require a minor variance, as the proposed severed lot line and required minimum setbacks in the town bylaw require, I believe it's 20.2 meters, whereas 18.8 is proposed. But this is something that would come before the Committee of Adjustment at a later date. We're just recommending it be included as a condition of approval for the severance. And town staff are recommending that council recommends to the Land Division Committee at the county to approve the consent with the standard conditions outlined in the report. We're currently unaware of any building plans. I anticipate we'll likely see the lot listed, but that's to be determined still.
Thank you, Ashley. So recommendation moved by Councillor Gunson, second by Councillor Dirksen, that the Council of the Town of Minto recommends the County of Wellington Land Division Committee approve the consent application B3823 Bernard and Goldschmidt for land legally described as concession 13 part lot 7 RP 61 R6089 parts 1 and 2 and part 4. Part 4 PT with a municipal address of 9568 O'Dwyer Road in the town of Minto, and the following conditions be considered. And this one has 5 conditions. So I'll open the questions to Ashley, if anybody has any. Likely the land division at Wellington County will be quick and get this approved, likely much quicker than they did 6 months ago. Is that a fair statement? I mean, they still have to answer all the questions, but I mean, this is what our premier wants, right? He wants intensification. And so as long as we, sight lines and all the other things on the road and everything like that, they'll likely go through fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I understand things work at the county is they'll expedite the applications through the land division committee meeting unless there's neighboring concerns, in which they open it up for comments. But generally speaking, they're pretty good with their timelines, and the conditions should be fairly standard to clear here as well.
Other questions? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of this motion? That's carried. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ashley. I'm going to pass the chair over to Councillor Dirks.
Thank you, Mayor Turton. And we have the first quarter 2023 financial review. So I will pass that to Mr. Gordon Duff.
Great.
Take us through that, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair Dirksen. This is a high-level one, just a review of our first quarter. So if everything was incurred evenly throughout the year, it would be 25%. And I'm kind of amazed we're at 22% in a bit, which isn't too far off, considering where we're at. Revenues coming in. We do have a comment about the tax arrears and payments, and they're still good, but you do notice the difference between 20 and 21. They're sneaking up a little bit because people have other places to spend their money, so it's not automatically taxes. And that was the counterintuitive thing during the worst of COVID. Our arrears went way down, and everyone was expecting they go way up. So that's kind of interesting. As I say, most things are coming in pretty much according to plan. Despite inflation, again, I would say we're in the property management and fleet management. Fuel prices have been certainly a little better than their peak, but not as good as they were especially in 2020. Other things like hydro and natural gas, we do our preliminary hedging, and so we're kind of insulated from some of the market vagaries and up and down. Again, our water, wastewater is coming in fine. We're still in the recently approved bylaw, and it goes up a percentage every year. I think at the bottom, it's kind of interesting. Mark's prepared some comparative tables, and you can see as a percentage, things really haven't varied all that much, both in terms of revenue or expenditure. As far as capital, it's early in the year, so we don't have construction, but we do have vehicle purchases. The other large project, which is coming to an end, is the upgrades at the Palmerston Sewage Treatment Plant, and they could carry on that despite the weather. And it's really, I'm going to say 98% done now, so that's good. So anyway, no surprises so far, so we hope to continue on that, but certainly entertain any questions or anything.
Any questions for Treasurer?
Thank
Mayor
you,
Turton.
Chair. So those two graphs at the bottom, they are amazing for the last 3 years. So close, it's ridiculous. And I mean, it makes you wonder how that can be. But
Especially those are 3 very different years, as we all know. we're doing the same stuff, but yeah, I think it's an amazingly steady trend considering the volatility that we've all lived through. Yes.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'm going to read the recommendation moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Elliott that Council of the Town of Minto receives report Finance 2023-006 regarding the 2023 first quarter financial review.
Sorry. If I may, Councillor Dirksen, can we just have a different mover? I believe that was just an error.
I think Councillor Gunson would like to do that. Okay, moved by Councillor Gunson and seconded by Councillor Elliott. The rest of the recommendation stays the same, so I won't read it again, even though it's nice and short. Okay, all in favor? Thank you, that carries. And we will move on to the second report for finance, tax rating bylaw.
Right. Thanks, Chair Dirksen. So as we know, we approved the budget. It seems like several months ago it was there. Certain things that the lower tiers have to wait for the county to approve, such as their ratios and any other tax policies. There were no major changes at all. Similar to the last couple of years, the only things that seem to change a bit are the business education rates, and they're set by the province. So we now have all the county bylaws were passed at their last meeting. And this is basically putting the mechanics in place to collect the taxes on the new assessment roll. Again, 7th year of the 4-year phase-ins, but we don't see any changes to that, anything I do that. So we'll have a bylaw later in the council meeting, so.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Treasurer Duff. Are there any questions? Okay, I'll read the recommendation moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson and seconded by Councillor Elliott. The Council of the Town of Minto receives report Finance 2023-007 regarding 2023 tax rating bylaw and consider passing bylaw 2023-38 in open session. All in favor? Thank you, that carries.
Yep.
I'll pass the chair back to the mayor. Thank you, Treasurer Duff.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dirksen. The next item is announcements. And we'll start with you, Councillor Dirksen, if you don't mind.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor Turton.
Then let's move along to Councillor.
Nothing from me this evening.
Just another reminder about the garden festival and the pancake breakfast on June the 3rd. Be a good time. Everybody needs to come out. Hopefully everybody can hear me so that the rest of the town knows about it. It's been advertised widely across the area, so promises to be a good weekend.
Councillor Elliott.
Nothing. Amazing, eh?
Really?
Gene took mine, so I'll just move on.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's all good.
So I have a couple things. One being May 16th, we had the groundbreaking of the Krydak property at Palmerston Industrial Park, and it was a great day. There was a lot of people there. The family, and I'm not going to try and pronounce their last name. They were they're a very congenial group. They were so happy to be in Minto. It was the discussions with everyone there. I talked to a lot of people, and it was pretty amazing. They couldn't say enough good things about our staff and how our staff has worked with them right from day one. And so thank you for that. And they're going to get started. I mean, there's some machinery, and it's good to see they've got some local people working with them, local contractors. There's earth moving equipment there, and it's going to be an amazing building and businesses. So I would like to announce that National Public Works Week is an annual week-long celebration of the essential public services rendered by infrastructure, construction, and operations staff. These professionals plan, design, build, manage, and operate the infrastructure that ensures a higher quality of life for our communities. Not to mention that they brave the snow and freezing rain to ensure that our roads are safe for you and your families. Town of Minto is very lucky to have a department made up of dedicated individuals, including our roads and drainage manager, public works clerk, development technicians, town landscape coordinator, and equipment operators. This week provides an important opportunity to recognize and acknowledge the achievements of the town of Minto's public works staff. Couldn't have said it better. So we absolutely, we've said this before. I mean, over Christmas, then our people out on the roads making it safe for our citizens, and every day they're out there doing the things that they do best. So thank you to our Public Works staff, and let's celebrate National Public Works Week. So, anything else? Okay, then we're going to moved by Councillor Zimmerman, seconded by Councillor Dirksen, that the Committee of the Whole convene in regular council. All in favor of that? That's carried. Any notices of motion? Anyone? Okay, resolution moved by Councillor Gunson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the Council of the Town of Minto ratifies the motion made in Committee of the Whole. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Bylaws. Moved by Councillor Zimmerman, seconded by Councillor Dirksen, that bylaws 2023-038 be read a first, second, third time and passed in open council and sealed with the seal of the corporation. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Thank you. Confirmatory resolution moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Elliott, that bylaw 2023-039 to confirm actions of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Minto respecting a meeting held May 23rd, 23, be read a first, second, third time and passed in open council, sealed with the seal of the corporation. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Adjournment. This resolution is moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Dirksen, that the Council of the Town of Minto adjourns to meet again at the call of the Mayor. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for a lovely meeting.